Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Today Television. I'm Tanya Aneja and we are here at B20 Summit and I have with me Mr. John Denton. He's leading the International Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Denton, thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time out and joining us here on Business Today Television. And I want to begin by asking you firstly about inclusivity. We are talking about financial inclusion. We are talking about women's inclusivity. So what are the challenges that the world is facing right now when it comes to inclusivity and what, according to you, should be done?
Oh, wow. Great question, Tanya. Thanks very much for having me, and a big shout out to all the viewers at Business India, Business Today, BTD TV. It's always fantastic to be with you. A couple of things. First of all, I think it's correct for me to explain something to you about our commitment to inclusivity at the ICC. So the International Chamber of Commerce was founded more than 100 years ago, and it was actually designed because there was a great concern that without the private sector stepping up, then the global economy, which had been, an important lifeline for so many people to have their families employed and their communities employed, would not function. So the private sector stepped up, created the International Chamber of Commerce. And what I've been doing since I took over some four years ago is reframing that to make it relevant in the 21st century. And so for me, it's all about business enabling peace, prosperity, and opportunity for all. So our mission then is to make business work for everyone, every day, and everywhere. But the essence of that then is about inclusivity. Because if you think about the global world where we are today, it's not dominated by the old Bretton Woods group. It's not dominated by the G7. It actually is reflective now of a much bigger kind of shift. And part of that is actually the emergence of the global south, also the emergence of different kind of connector groups, like Turkey's a connector group, Saudi Arabia's a connector economy, etc. A lot of things going on there you need to think about. And so what's been important to me then is to ensure that the ICC itself reflects that. So we are now in 170 countries. We represent more than 50, 60 million businesses. More than 1.5, 1.6 billion workers in the world rely on the success of the members of the ICC for their livelihood. But fascinatingly, almost 70% of the ICC is now in the global south. So we are actually the most inclusive business organization in the world. And we actually have to be, because one of the challenges we've seen has been the increasing gulf of trust between the global north or advanced economies and the global south. One of our aims is to bridge that. You can't bridge that if you're exclusive, you have to be inclusive. So we've been able to do that. Even my board, when I became Secretary General, I think 10% were women. Now it's just on 50%. We operate our own ICC courts of arbitration. 50% of the participants of that are now women. We live up to, I suppose, what we call for, which is inclusiveness. But we also reflect geographic inclusiveness as well. So we have all those elements in place. Because I think, as we said earlier in an earlier panel, the failure to understand the importance of inclusiveness will actually undermine the potential for economic growth. Because it's not a question of choosing trade or growth or inclusivity. It's actually about understanding that good trading systems will enable growth, and growth will only happen if it's inclusive. So it becomes a symbiotic relationship. Trade is a vector through which you can get growth, and growth, of course, can only happen if it's inclusive. So we look at it from those perspectives, and then there's the various elements to it. There's inclusive finance, there's inclusive work in terms of access to technology, inclusive education, inclusive social frameworks. But for us, it's not just a word. It's actually a critical business mission for us to deliver that.
Growth can only happen when it's inclusive. You said that. So good to hear that. But
you won't be sustainable unless you're inclusive. And you won't grow effectively unless you're inclusive. And you'll need trade to be functioning to allow those two things to actually move along as well.
Right. Absolutely, you said it. And let's talk about digitization as well. You're passionate about that. But how do you look at the progress, that the world has made so far when it comes to digitization?
Fantastic. I mean, I just look at India itself. I've been coming to India for I don't know, 30 or more years. So when you think about the progress that India has made in terms of the acceptance and the speed of digitization of this economy, it's extraordinary. And also you think about the leadership on a global level. I mean, you just look at the CEOs of major tech companies who are of Indian origin, if not still Indian nationals, etc. So it's pretty extraordinary. So the world has gone to an amazing place in terms of digitalization. But there's a couple of things that need to be thought about. First of all, do we have an effectively functioning public commons around the digital economy? We don't actually, because the WTO was formed before the actual internet went into the public domain and before payment systems were attached to the internet. So the WTO's rules do not adequately reflect that. And you need to have a publicly curated public commons around the digital economy to really push it along. So we would like to see, for example, India play a leadership role in actually enabling that to happen. Thinking about how all the elements of the WTO can be aligned to support a thriving digital economy. Because so many Indian businesses rely on a thriving digital economy. So that also requires maintenance of the moratorium on tariffs, on digital cross-border data flows, things like that. The need to create digital standards to operate, which is what the ICC is all about at the moment. We're really focused on taking trade itself from analog documentation to digital documentation. So one sort of classic data point here is that 99% of bills of lading are still paper-based. Heavens, we're in 2023. And why is that? Because there are no standards, but also electronic bills of lading are not legally enforceable. So we need to actually work, and the Indian government can show leadership here in working to ensure the application of what's called a process that we worked on with UNCITRAL, called the application of the model laws on electronic transferable records, is actually instituted into Indian law, so it actually operates here so that bills of lading which are electronic will be recognised, and that will dramatically increase their uptake. And of course in doing so you lower the cost because you remove inefficiencies, and that makes it more available for SMEs. It's another way of creating inclusive trade.
Okay. And since you are at B20 Summit, you must be having a lot of conversations with a lot of leaders from all over the world. So, are there any recommendations that are coming in from, different task force you are excited about? I mean, any top recommendations according to you?
Well, there's a couple of things that I've been focused on. One is around digital, and I think we've been pushing very hard to create a number of principles to allow the digital economy, or to allow the transfer of trading documents from analog to digital. And a little, I think, a little less recognised was the announcement by the G20 trade ministers in the last 24, 36 hours to actually support those 10 principles. So that's a deliverable from our perspective, and that's a good thing. But actually, we want the G20 also to focus on deliverables that they can actually deliver.
Yes.
And so we do think there needs to be focus on accountability, but also transparency around the rise of protectionism. What that would require the G20 to do is to mandate the WTO to actually bring forward in a transparent way all the protectionist moves that are taken by members of the G20 in a given year, because there should be a standstill on that. The G20 should actually be delivering a standstill, but also transparency on it. The other is the G20 is responsible in many respects for the global financials, the sustainability of the global financial system and its stability. But we need to ensure that that stability is understood not just in the context of 2008, 2009, which was the heady days of the G20 and at its birth with the coming out of the global financial crisis, to the various crises we are seeing now, where you're actually seeing a perverse outcome of the application of the capital adequacy rules, which are governed by the financial stability players in Basel. And what's actually happening is that they've got a rule which made sense in 0809, where a company in a jurisdiction cannot have a credit rating higher than that jurisdiction's own credit rating. But what's happening now is that you would have seen this in the last 12 months, 18 months. There's been a rapid deterioration of the sovereign debt and the sovereign situation of a number of LDCs and actually in middle income and emerging economies, which means now that the actual functioning businesses in those areas are seeing the cost of access to credit go up. That's putting a squeeze which is completely unintended. That was not the purpose of the rule. That was not the purpose of the rule around capital adequacy there. That needs to be re-examined and actually recalibrated. And the G20 should focus on that as a clear deliverable this year.
Absolutely, you said it, and thank you so much, Mr. Denton. But before we let you go, here's a special copy of
Who is
our.
this guy?
He is our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and we did an exclusive interview with him. So here's a special copy for you, and I hope you will like it.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. We're seeing Prime Minister Modi tomorrow.
Yeah, we are. Thank you so much, Mr. Denton.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.